The Liberals have released a roadmap towards destruction. If the options in this roadmap are taken up, we will not limit global warming to less than 2 degrees as set out in the Paris Agreement. It's a recipe for climate crisis. Australia has to end its addiction to toxic methane gas, which is heavily promoted in this report. Gas, coal and oil are the major causes of climate change. When swapping one for another is not the answer. We need to get on to renewables. Toxic methane is more than 80% times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. And if we start fracking Australia and threatening our farmland, as the roadmap and the leaked COVID Commission reports set out, we are setting Australia on a pathway towards destruction. The government still doesn't seem to get it, and it's a roadmap written by the fossil fuel lobby, and it's one that is not only going to make Australia an uncompetitive place to be in 10 or 20 years' time as the rest of the world switches towards renewables, it's going to set us on a path towards climate destruction.
If this were written by the fossil fuel lobby, wouldn't it say, let's build some new Healy power plants?
Well, everyone recognises that using public money to build new coal-fired power stations is ridiculous, but what this report proposes is using public money to fund new gas infrastructure. Now, that is taking money from schools and hospitals and putting it into fossil fuels at a time when we're told we have to quit fossil fuels within the next 10 or 15 years at most, otherwise we're not going to stop the climate crisis. So taking money from schools and hospitals, giving it to gas is like taking money from the health budget to give to asbestos. And there is still no plan in this roadmap to phase out coal. It is premised on keeping coal in the system, potentially keeping it in for longer using public money, and that is our roadmap towards destruction.
Well, it talks about coal with possible carbon capture and storage as well as gas. If that technology becomes cheaper, it's a proven technology, the problem has been scale and cost, but if it does become cheaper, you've got no issue surely with the way that emissions are reduced. As long as they're reduced, it's a good result, right?
Public money should not be taken from schools and hospitals to go into a unicorn technology of carbon capture and storage that has had years to prove its effectiveness and is still failing. If you want proven technology, then look at renewables. They are working right now. We don't need to invent new technologies for those. They exist. Now, the government says they want to back all horses in the race. Well, that's an admission that the government is backing losers. And when it says we've got to use public money to go into CCS or public money to go into gas, that is an admission that they're going to back losers because they know that those industries can't stand on their own 2 feet. And you've got to ask yourself, why are they now all of a sudden proposing public money to go to fossil fuels? I think it's no coincidence that, as we've seen from the leaked COVID task force report that's out today, which is again backing gas and backing public subsidies for gas, we are seeing that the government is using a corrupt process to determine Australia's recovery path. It is being written by the fossil fuel lobby, and the methane mafia and the coal lobby have got their fingerprints all over this, and it is a roadmap towards destruction.
Just on carbon capture and storage, though, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has modelled various ways to 1.5 degrees, so limiting warming. The cheapest way, they say, would include carbon capture and storage. Do you disagree with that IPCC modelling?
The cheapest way includes a massive switch to renewables, and the government shows no sign of doing that. And the cheapest way involves putting a price on pollution and using that money to grow renewables. And the government's not
given what's already
not
out
doing
there
that either.
Right around the world in the economy, including ours, the cheapest way is with CCS.
That is completely untrue. That is completely untrue.
Well,
and you will not find people who are prepared to back that up, because the cheapest way at the moment is to build new renewables because the fuel from them is free. Now, the government is just picking and choosing bits from international
there. When you say it's untrue, though, this is IPCC modelling, which obviously will include lots of renewables, but part of the transition will be, they say, the cheapest way, carbon capture and storage. Now, that's got to prove itself to some degree on the cost in terms of that scale, but if that happens, that will be the cheapest way. So why not leave that door open if that's what this expert panel is saying?
if the government takes a lot of money and billions of dollars away from schools and hospitals and gives it to its gas mates and then gives some money to coal mates to develop technology that they haven't been able to prove itself, then maybe by 2050 they might be able to do something of it. By that time, it will be too late. We have to take action in the next 10 years, and we know that coal and gas and oil are the main sources of climate change, and we need a plan to get off them. And because of the corrupt process that is driving government policy at the moment, headed by the COVID Commission that is only coming up with recommendations that support fossil fuels, we are on track now, if these recommendations are taken up, to exceed the Paris targets of 2 degrees, well exceed them. And that means, Tom, we're not talking about...
I just want to ask you about this modelling by the IPCC, which looked at different ways of getting to 1.5. Have you looked at it? Have you familiarised yourself with what they say to do with carbon capture and storage?
If you have a look at the IPCC report and you look at the scenarios that are set out in the IPCC about how we are going to limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees, they make it very, very clear that we have to get off coal, about 2/3 off coal by 2030. Now, the Greens say we should go faster, but if we want to talk about IPCC modelling, they're saying by 2030, get off coal. That means closing down about 10 to 16
I'm just asking what you think about their view on carbon capture and storage. Do you think they're wrong to be suggesting this path?
I'm saying if the industry, if it were a thing, the industry surely could have developed it by now. They're making billions of dollars of profit, and they've had ample opportunity to develop it. I don't think a cent of public money should go.
It's proven. It's just a question of the cost of it. I mean, it's the same way in hydrogen. Right now, it's not economical to have hydrogen via renewables and export that. It's not economical. It probably will be in the future.
But we know it's technically feasible, and it's a question of economies of scale, which is a very different proposition.
That's technically
feasible. We don't know that. They've tried CCS on numerous occasions and have not been able to make it commercially viable, and not only because of questions of economies of scale, because of technical questions as well. Look, at the end of the day, the answers are there in front of us. We know we're blessed in Australia with ample sun and wind. We could be a renewable energy world leader. Now, if we had a government that wasn't in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry, then we would have a roadmap that says, let's have a plan to pull out coal, get onto renewables, and we could do it quickly and cheaply in Australia. The government hasn't done that. There's a corrupt process here at the heart of this recovery plan.
Just one other interesting story today, the ANU saying death certificates should include climate change for the main part because of heat. What do you think of that?
Well, climate crisis is killing people. We know it is killing people, and we know it's happening already, and we are seeing people die who don't need to. We're seeing people die through bushfires, through the smoke inhalation through bushfires. We're seeing the spread of diseases as a result of the climate crisis. We are seeing wars and conflict that are being, the dial is being turned up on conflict because of the climate crisis. And I come back to the point that where is the government taking us? Yes, the government's got these various options in its roadmap, but one of the things that matters...
You have expressed that. We're nearly out of time. But just on this point of ANU, I mean, is it a bit problematic? You can't say this fire was caused by climate change or this hot day was caused by climate change. I mean, aren't you sort of opening the door to everything being the fault of climate change, any single heat death? What
we do know is that many events are now much, much more likely because of climate change. And if you're told, look, if you do this certain thing, it is going to make it more likely that people will die, and then as a government you go ahead and do it, then you've got to bear some responsibility for that. Like, the evidence is very, very clear that we've got two pathways. One is to minimise the loss of life on this planet and in this country by getting off coal and gas and onto renewables. And the other is to keep going the way we are, which we're being told will result in more people dying. And the government is sadly choosing the second option.